gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to this edition of Political Smackdown. We have our usual crew with us. There's Andy Dedman on my left, Mike Philbeck on my right, and Wes Westmoreland on my left. And I'm Betsy Wells, your host.
Betsy, you're making me feel underdressed today. You really are.
Well, I'm back from the National Democratic Convention, and I wanted to share what happened with y'all. And I wanted to talk first about how great it was in Chicago. This was my 7th national convention, starting in 2000 in Los Angeles, and it was positively exhilarating. Every night got better, and it was the first night was President Joe Biden's night, as well as Hillary Clinton gave the speech of her life. Tuesday was featured the Obamas, Michelle, and President Barack. Wednesday night, we met Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate, and Thursday night, the culmination with Kamala Harris accepting the presidential candidacy for the Democratic Party. It was 4 days filled with joy and happiness, and I hope you could see that when you were watching on TV. What did you get from watching the Democratic National Convention? Andy?
Well, I thought it was pretty good. The one thing that I was insulted by was how President Biden was treated. He should have, he's a sitting Democratic president, and he should not have been shoved over into, I think it's past midnight or something. And I know he was on his way out and all that, but still, you should show a little bit of respect for a man like that. He has worked so hard for this country and this party his whole adult life, and that's probably going to be his last speech at a convention, and I just felt like he deserved a little bit better than that. But other than that, I thought it was interesting. I was really surprised how many Republicans you had coming to speak. I kept waiting on the Cheneys to show up. I really thought that, really, can you imagine if her and her dad showed up? Holy cow, that'd be the end of times for sure. But I thought overall it was fine. It was nice to have an uplifting. I wish we would have had more, maybe a little bit more issue driven, more in depth. I think that would, well, I'm saying that I think that would have been a really great opportunity. But Betsy, you're an old hand at these conventions, and it doesn't matter who it is. It's all about just getting people ginned up and excited and ready to go. And that was the only thing. But I really think that they should have done a little better with President Biden. I really do.
I really liked his speech because he didn't get swarmy or anything, and he talked about what he'd done.
Yeah.
But they cut James Taylor that first night. He was
and I hate
backstage
that.
Getting ready. He was ready to go on, and they cut him because somebody had talked too long. Wes, I know you watched every minute of the Democratic Convention, didn't you?
I actually did. And you asked what we got from the convention. First, let me start with, Betsy, it's quite an honor to be a delegate. Congratulations to have been a delegate to 7 is even a bigger honor. And obviously the party has great respect for you to put you in that position. But what did I get from watching? I didn't get COVID.
I figured that was coming out.
Did you not listen to Fauci? You should have worn 2 masks and stayed 6 feet apart. I did get something on my boots, but I've got that scraped off now.
Oh, me.
And joy. Several years back it was hope. At some point, Andy, to your point, policy comes into, wait a minute, I'm getting a call. Breaking news. Betsy, Tim Walz has resigned and is not going to be the vice presidential nominee. apparently he was told he might be deployed to battleground states.
You stayed up all night to come up with that one, didn't you, Wes?
Wes. All right. We'll move to Mike. That's pretty
that was
good.
one of Wes's better lines.
That's pretty good. All right, go ahead, Mike.
Well, Betsy, I had mixed emotions. What little I saw of it,
What little
pain
you
and
saw.
agony,
Oh, my.
And I watched
and a
every
little
bit of Republican one.
and a touch of nausea.
Oh, Mike.
But mostly what I got from what little I did watch of it, and of course I saw replays of parts of it like anybody that watches the news will. But it just reminded me and reaffirmed why I left the Democrat Party in the summer of 1984. That's 40 years ago. It's because I watched the San Francisco Democratic Convention, and that was when I realized that they were on a different wavelength than me, and regardless of whether there were any Republicans you could elect locally, I wasn't going to be a Democrat anymore. But I do join Wes and Andy in congratulating you on being a delegate and standing up for what you believe in.
Well, thank you, Mike. On the whole, y'all, it was wonderful. And the breakfast has started, and since North Carolina's a battleground state, we got wined and dined by all the major figures. I showed some pictures with like Mark Kelly, but like Gretchen Whitmire. You had several, Jamie Raskin, just major. That's the Secretary of State from like Arizona with Elaine Marshall and myself, and it's just, and people that usually we get some that come in for the breakfast, but this time people were wanting to come and talk to North Carolina, and but it was a wonderful experience, and I was just delighted. And one of the things that I don't think some of you got to see this, but I love the way that Kamala Harris's great nieces did a instruction about how you pronounce her name, Kamala. Not Camilla, not Carmela, Kamala. So, but anyway, it's like Mamala with her stepchildren. Well, it was a great convention. It was joyful. You got to see Stevie Wonder. You got to see Legend. There were just several great singers and performers that you got to see. I thought they did a good job of moving it from speaker to speaker and not getting so bored. Now, I must say those seats there at where the Bulls play were very narrow, and the aisles were very narrow. But, and it was sometimes, we did get to come home with something called COVID, but I got better, and that's why I wasn't here last week, but I'm fine.
Well, Betsy, a lot of us are going to be sick if Kamala wins the election.
Well, I just don't know about that. There'll be others of us dancing in the street
I'm
with
going to
joy.
get a shot of joy. How about you?
But it did remind me, I was in Denver whenever President Obama accepted the nomination, and that was a wonderful time. And then I was in Philadelphia when Hillary broke the glass ceiling. So to be in Chicago was wonderful, and I look forward to seeing the inauguration.
And I was glad there wasn't any trouble. I mean, everybody was on their best behavior, and I think that you got to say one thing. At least the city of Chicago knew their history and was ready for it. And
They did.
think
All the trouble was 4 blocks away.
Well, no, they really took care of it. The other thing I wanted to point out, and I don't know if y'all registered it, but Roy Cooper was a national star at the convention. He was being interviewed down by different states, and then he got to introduce Kamala Harris on the 4th night.
And that's when I fell asleep.
Oh no, you fell asleep.
What a terrible speaker.
Well, we had North Carolina shined, even though, and we were close to the stage, even though we were down on the extreme right. So, but it was a good experience, and we'll just continue on. We've got 60-some days left before November 5th, and I'm sure we'll talk more about different things. All right, now moving on. While the Harris-Walz campaign hit the road running after the convention, doing a bus tour down in Georgia, Trump was asked by a parent to attend the anniversary ceremony of the 13 killed while U.S. was withdrawing from Afghanistan 3 years ago. And this was at Arlington, and Arlington is a very sacred place, and where you receive the utmost respect from people that come. And my husband's family has 3 different people buried in Arlington, and whenever we would go to Washington, go to Arlington, we would go visit their graves. There's certain rules that you cannot be used, that Arlington can be used in campaign literature, commercials, pictures, and so forth. But an incident occurred where an Arlington official was pushed by a Trump staffer. And Trump posed for pictures with family members with his thumbs up while standing among our fallen dead. Where is the respect for our fallen soldiers, just like this cartoon shows? Is this a newsworthy story? All right, Mike?
Well, there's certainly no doubt. I disagree with the way you set that up entirely. There's no doubt Trump went because he was invited by several Gold Star families. And let's not forget that these Gold Star families had family members who were a part of the Biden-Harris fiasco that cost the lives of 13 Americans in the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. And there's no doubt that Trump had every right to go. And there's also no doubt that the Secretary of the Army, a Biden appointee, tried to stop them and could not. As to the shove, there was a report that there's really no pictures. A single cemetery employee who was a civilian objected and was, according to some reports, pushed aside. And the Trump campaign officials deny that any physical altercation. This is just political because it's a bad look for the for the Democratic nominee, because she is a part of the botched Afghanistan withdrawal that cost 13 American lives, and we still have billions of dollars of equipment we left in Afghanistan for the enemy to have. Biden is the sorriest example of an American president on foreign policy in my lifetime.
All right, Andy, you want to straighten him out?
Mike. I would remind you there was a Republican president sure did leave a lot of stuff in Vietnam in '73.
I'll remind you, Lyndon Baines Johnson was the cause of it being there.
No, it was there. It was the last man there, and that was him. And that's the cause of this whole thing. It's always not one person. It is a continuation of policy. A lot of times it maybe has not been thought out as well as it could. But it's wrong for you just to say that, Mike, about that. That's just, you're wrong on that. But
if we'd had, that wouldn't have happened had Trump been president, nor would what's going on in Ukraine have happened, in my opinion, had Trump been president. Biden is a disaster.
And the leaving in Afghanistan
that won't
was
change,
set up
Andy.
by
He's
Trump.
a disaster.
well,
All right, go ahead,
Trump
Andy.
had already promised they were going out, so there
Even
we were.
put the date on.
But here's the other thing too, and this is where the politics of this gets really, it's a tough needle to thread. He is a former president that was invited by this family. Now, the rules about Arlington are very clear for everybody. And I mean, we've had, presidents from every stripe to be there. I've been there myself. I was there when there was a wreath laying at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I'm gonna tell you, if that doesn't put, goosebumps on you, nothing will. That was.
And a tear in your eye.
It was impressive. But I think the main issue was the President Trump taking these pictures with his thumbs up afterwards. What he should have done, he was invited by these families. He should have went and laid the wreath. And if everyone takes pictures like that, they should have gone outside the cemetery, I think. Because you've got to have, and remember, these men and women there died. They died trying to protect this country, and we owe them at least enough respect to not make it a political football out of this. And I really think that President Trump was not served well by his staff. It's hard enough to rein him in, I'm sure. But I would have said, Mr. President, we don't need to be taking any pictures here or videos.
Well, now, I don't know if you know this or not, but Kelly Barnett was the lady who requested the picture, and her son was one of the ones killed.
I understand that.
And she asked for the picture for herself, and she blamed the Arlington people for the leak of the picture.
Well, that was coming out. So it's hard when you're following a former president and still a candidate for president. I mean, your uncle get pictures of all of that. I mean, I just feel like it's a tough case to do, but you've got to remember, when in doubt, fall on the side of dignity and respect. And this guy just has a lot of trouble doing that, it seems. I mean, he's told, how many times has he said, well, you know, I don't, these people have been captured and been prisoner of wars, they're losers. I don't want to be with people like that. People got killed. I mean, he said this stuff repeatedly, and that's what is offensive to me, just as an American. And this should not have happened the way it did.
All right, Wes, you want to close it out before we go to
Well,
break?
we're running short on time, but respect seems to be the operative word here. Respect is not sending these young people into harm's way in the first place. It's not pulling them out and leaving others vulnerable. Let's respect the value of their life while they're alive. That's the whole point of all of this. Trump was invited by multiple Gold Star families to be there. An individual asked for a private photograph. There's no question that the Biden-Harris administration objected to the visit, tried to stop it, because it's the reminder of the fiasco that cost 13 American soldiers their lives, which was completely avoidable. As far as the photo, Betsy, I've been to Arlington every time I go to Washington, I go to Arlington. It is hallowed ground, without a question. But Zone 60, which is where this occurred, where the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan are buried, is very different from the rest of the cemetery. It's described as sanctified but not somber. Many celebrations are held. After the wreath laying, an individual asked for a private photograph with Trump. This is just not worth our time.
And we'll talk more about this later on at another time, but now we need to go to break. Please stay with us and come back for the rest of Political Smackdown.
She gets her hair from her mom, her eyes from her dad, and her drugs from her home medicine cabinet. Fact: more people die from drug overdoses than from car crashes or gun violence. And over 50% of those deaths are from prescription drugs. Prescription drug abuse is preventable. 1. Secure and take regular inventory of our medications. 2. Dispose of unused or expired medications. 3. Share this message with others. Be aware, don't share, lock your meds.
Thank you for returning and being with us for the rest of Political Smackdown today. We're going to change topics. One of the major topics of discussion for this presidential campaign is the presence of Project 2025, which is a 900-page document that Trump is pretending to know nothing about. You know, Sergeant Schultz from the Hogan's Heroes, I know nothing. It reminds me of Trump saying, what? What's that? Well, 140 of his workers in his administration worked on it. But this is a document compiled by the ultra-conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, which would change many of our rights and our government if Trump is elected to his second term. Many of our freedoms will be stripped away. We could talk more about this, but let's get started, as this will be a reoccurring theme in the 2024 campaign. All right, Wes, go ahead and start.
Well, I've got plenty to say, but let's start with your question. What freedoms will be stripped away, Betsy?
Well, the freedoms to the mass deportation, freedom about cutting, end discrimination against LGBTQ Americans, puts limits on contraception, abuses, warrants, surveillance.
What freedom will be stripped away?
That one where you have surveillance by the government, where the states will have to report on women's miscarriages and abortions to a guy, and they'll cut Social Security and Medicare, abolish the Department of
Whoa. There's nothing in it about cutting Social Security and Medicare. That has been a lie that's been shown to be a lie.
Well,
and
by the left.
As is most of that, that was my point. I wanted to get that on the record. According to PBS, the plan doesn't call for abortion nationwide, although that was going to be on your list, I'm sure. You know, many think tanks produce position papers every single cycle. Trump has pushed back on this one. But Betsy, the reality, Heritage is not a conservative think tank. It's a neocon think tank. There was a fight some years back within the conservative movement over that. The conservatives lost. Jim DeMint took over Heritage and completely changed its purpose. But to your point, 2025, which Trump has rejected, does secure the border, finishes the walls, de-weaponizes the federal government, FBI, DOJ, unleashes American energy production, cuts the growth of government spending, makes federal bureaucrats more accountable, improves education by moving it away from the federal government and back to the states, bans biological males from competing in women's sports. In total, I don't know that Project 2025 is a bad thing, though I don't support it and I do not support Heritage. My preference is Cato Institute.
All right, Andy?
Well, when you put this out, Betsy, I said, you know, I needed to try to take a look at this. I mean, I didn't have time to look at 990-something pages. But I pulled out one in particular where it's talking about the changes at the EPA, and it's got various things. It's talking about what all they want to do as far as forever chemicals that try to cut back on some of the cleanup and production of these things. You know, it just keeps going on, and we don't have time really to go into all this. But I pulled this off the League of Women Voters. I figured that's about as middle of the road as you can probably come with. Because
Boy, you are brainwashed.
well, no, after I looked at everybody else had it, it was on all extremes, and I said, I just want information.
You ought to look at the actual
want a summary.
document.
I couldn't find it. And you punch it in your Google, and it's all this other people got their opinions on it. I mean, I probably could have went to Heritage Foundation.
Heritage.org would have it.
I probably, but I was afraid my eyes would go fall out or something looking at that stuff. But what it boils down to is that he can say he doesn't know anything about it. And you know, he really doesn't take a lot of time in studying much of anything except the size of his crowds. And that's about it. So I think he's probably got some cover on that. But I don't know. This whole thing, it is a little scary to see this, but and it's like Wes did say, he said it was very factual. You've got all these think tanks that are all over the place, coming up with all kind of stuff. Now, the reason why this was taking up so much time and effort is because, one, it's coming out of the Heritage Foundation, which tends to be a very right-wing organization, and there are so many former Trump people in his administration in here, and that's why it feels that way. So I don't see how he can not know about it.
Well,
and it is a scary thing to look at if they implement all of that. It would be.
And one thing that will abolish checks and balances, because it would take away the independence of the FBI and the CIA. They would all come under the president. It increases the power of the president. All right, Mike, you haven't got to say much.
It's an attempt to try to rein in the administrative state in part, to where that the bureaucrats don't tell everybody else what to do. That's a big part of it. But you know, it's interesting to me, since Ronald Reagan was elected and took office in 1981, Heritage Foundation has published this every 4 years. Every 4 years. This is nothing new. And this one's been out for over a year, and nothing was said about it until Biden dropped out of the race by the Democratic Party. And then a lot was said it was wrong. It specifically does not mention and propose any cuts to Social Security or changes to the retirement age. But you know what the fact of the matter is, and as one who is old enough to be on Social Security, last year it was 22% of the total American budget. It's on a disaster time scale, and something's got to be done more than's being done, which is going to be something, but nobody, of course, wants to touch it because it's the third rail of politics, and everybody that's that age is going to get all up in the air about making any changes unless they're way, way out there. But anyway, it's much ado about nothing, like most of what Democrat stuff is.
Oh, listen
Oh,
to
Mike,
you.
Mike.
Mostly nothing.
Oh, listen, and you know.
I could say a lot more, but Wes hit a lot of it, and it's just sad to see so much misrepresentation
And to
of it.
abolish the Department of Education abolishes public
It's
funding.
illegal. It's
Oh, listen,
unconstitutional.
we
It should
could have
never
another whole
occur.
show on
It
that,
should
but
have
we're
never
going
been
to
created by
switch.
Jimmy Carter,
Oh,
and Reagan
listen.
should have got rid of it when he said he was going to.
Now,
Yes.
thank you all for tuning in and hearing the right way from the Democrats, and then you just pray for these two Republicans beside me.
Please do.
All right. Well, we
We
pray
need
for
it.
each other every
What
night,
is it you
don't
say,
we?
Mike?
I
We need the prayer and they need the practice?
Yep, that's
We
it.
need the prayers and you need
I've
the
used
practice.
All
that
right,
many a
very
time.
quickly, we're going to talk about our governor's race. I was constantly asking Chicago about our Republican candidate for governor. Was he the best that the North Carolina GOP could do for a candidate? What is the state of this race? Quickly, Andy.
Well, I think it's kind of bad though when you look and that's the best you got. Now, I understand he was in Shelby yesterday, and Mike got a picture of it with him, and I think it's up there. We can show that. But Mike, the question I got is, why will he not pay his pornographer off? I mean, there he took a video back in the '80s and paid it off. I guess he gave him all that pizza when he was working for Papa John's. I guess what it was. But I mean, this is it's kind of silly, but this is the kind of stuff that comes out in elections, and I wish what he needs to do is just go give that guy $25 and be done with it.
All right, Mike, quickly.
Yeah, Mark was in Shelby on rather short notice and had about 100 people or so show up yesterday. It seemed to me like I didn't count heads, but Mark, I think, has said some things he wishes he hadn't have said, but he did make a point in his little speech yesterday, Andy. He said the reason Josh Stein is talking about Facebook, things he said 10 years ago in his ads, is because he don't want anybody to know he was a part of the General Assembly in 2008 and 2009 and 2010, and before that, that went through 6 years of giving teachers and other state employees 0 raises.
Well, the economy was in the
But,
tank
and
too.
that's the General Assembly. All right, Wes.
And he was in it. Josh Stein was in it.
Well, he was one person in it. All right, Wes, very quickly.
And he
Well-
voted for the budget that did not give raises.
Over and over. I did not
that.
did not choose to go to the meeting yesterday when the Lieutenant Governor was in town. I'll concur with what Mike said, and I think you got two choices. Whether Robinson is the best choice, Andy, is a question, but certainly is a better choice than Stein. Look at his policies, look at what Stein's done, look at the cases he's brought. But nevertheless,
You're struggling with that.
And
I
you're
understand.
struggling.
Wes.
All right, very quickly. Andy, what's your lightning round?
Well, I've already used a little bit of it, but everybody needs to pay attention. We're in football season. It's full blown right now. And we had our first sighting in Kansas City of who? Who's the number one fan of Kansas City?
Who?
The woman.
crickets.
Crickets. Well, anyway, it was a wonderful game. I enjoyed it.
Oh,
It-
Swift.
Yeah,
Yeah, who'd you
yeah,
think?
of course.
I figured somebody
Yes,
come up with it.
yes,
And
Taylor
she was
Swift.
looking
All
fine
right,
too, by the
good.
way.
All right, Mike, quickly. What's yours?
Betsy, we don't really have time. We're about out of time.
We
Mine
are
will take
about-
longer than that.
Okay, Wes, how about yours? Is
I'll
that
just say it's been 334 days since Americans were taken hostage by Hamas. Of course, one was killed last week. How many more days will it be before this administration quits talking about a ceasefire and lets Israel win the dadgum war?
all right? And that we're through, and y'all come back next week for Political Smackdown.